My dad found money in my closet and spent it all on my sister's wedding. I said nothing. A few days later, my grandpa asked about the money I was keeping for him, and I told him everything. Chaos followed. I'm still processing everything that went down, but I need to get this off my chest. This is about how my spoiled sister literally destroyed our entire family over her wedding, and how karma came back to bite her hard. I'm 31 male, and I've been basically the sole provider for my family since I was 22. I work as an electrical contractor. Started as an apprentice, worked my way up through journeyman, and now I run my own small electrical business doing residential and commercial work. It's demanding work with long hours, but the money's solid when you stay busy and build a good reputation. I live with my parents. Frank, 60 male, and Linda, 59 female, plus my sister Jessica, 27 female, in this old 2-story house my dad inherited from his brother about 15 years ago. And when I say I support everyone, I mean everything. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, car insurance, property taxes, home repairs, you name it, it comes out of my paycheck. Here's some background on why this situation is so messed up. My dad, Frank, used to work at the steel mill until it closed down about 10 years ago. Instead of finding another job, he decided he was done working and now spends his days watching sports, playing video games, and complaining about how the economy screwed him over. My mom, Linda, works part-time at a grocery store but barely makes $300 a week, which doesn't even cover groceries for 4 people. Then there's Jessica. Oh boy, where do I even start with this piece of work? She's never held a real job in her life. After high school, she went to community college for like a semester, which I paid for before dropping out because it was too stressful. Since then, she's been living like a princess, sleeping until noon, spending hours on social media, shopping with money she doesn't have, and dating a string of guys who all seem to have one thing in common. They're loaded. The girl is a straight-up gold digger. I've watched her cycle through boyfriends based purely on their bank accounts. There was Tyler, who worked in finance. She dated him for 8 months until she found out he was leasing his BMW. Then came Brad, who owned a restaurant. That lasted until she discovered he was drowning in debt. She's always got some scheme to find a rich guy to take care of her. What really gets to me is how my parents enable her. They act like she's some delicate flower who can't handle real work. Jessica is special. Mom always says she just needs to find the right opportunity. She's 27 years old. Meanwhile, I'm up at 5 a.m. every day working in all weather, crawling through attics and basements so everyone can live comfortably. I make about $4,500 a month on average. But with the mortgage, $1,800 utilities, $300 groceries, $600 insurance, $400 and all the other house expenses, I'm lucky to have $500 left for myself. I drive a 2010 pickup truck with 180,000 miles because I can't afford anything newer. Haven't taken a vacation in 6 years. But did I complain? Number, because I thought family came first? I thought I was doing the right thing, being the responsible one. I thought eventually they'd appreciate it, or at least acknowledge what I was doing for them. I was so wrong it's not even funny. The worst part is how they treat me like I'm being dramatic when I'm exhausted. Like, sorry, I don't have energy to chat after working since 5 a.m. and dealing with difficult customers all day, but someone's got to pay for the roof over your heads. When I come home tired and covered in dust from crawling through some nasty crawl space, Jessica will make comments about how I smell like work and maybe I should shower before dinner. My parents have this attitude like I owe them this lifestyle. Dad will say things like, "Well, you're living here too," as if I'm getting some great deal, completely ignoring that I'm paying for literally everything. Mom treats me like a roommate who happens to pay all the bills rather than her son who's sacrificing his own future for their comfort. Jessica is the worst, though. She acts like my financial support is just the natural order of things, like I'm some kind of ATM machine that exists solely to fund her lifestyle. She'll ask me to drive her places because my car is making a weird noise but never offers gas money. She'll eat the food I buy without ever contributing a single dollar to groceries. She'll leave lights on all over the house and run the air conditioning constantly because it's too hot, completely oblivious to the fact that I'm the one paying the electric bill. What makes it even more frustrating is watching her post on social media about being blessed and living her best life while never mentioning that her best life is funded entirely by her brother's hard work. She'll post pictures of new clothes, expensive makeup, fancy coffee drinks, all bought with money she didn't earn. I kept telling myself this situation was temporary, that eventually Dad would find work again, or Jessica would grow up and get a real job, or at least they'd show some appreciation for what I was doing. I held on to the hope that family meant something more than just being a source of money. That hope was about to get crushed in the worst possible way. Everything changed when Jessica started dating Tyler Blackwood in March. This 32-year-old financial advisor was different from her usual targets. He drove a Mercedes, lived in a fancy downtown condo, and was clearly loaded. More importantly, he seemed genuinely interested in my sister. Jessica's attractive, I'll give her that. Instagram model, looks always perfectly dressed. Makeup on point, but she's not the brightest bulb and has the personality of wet cardboard unless she's manipulating someone. Within 2 weeks, Jessica's whole attitude shifted. She started acting rich, talking about when Tyler and I move in together, and quit her mall job because Tyler doesn't think his girlfriend should work retail. My parents ate it up. Dad bragged about his daughter dating a successful businessman, while Mom treated Jessica like royalty, doing her laundry, making special meals, basically waiting on her hand and foot. I watched this unfold with growing irritation. Here I was still paying for everything in the house, while Jessica got celebrity treatment for landing a rich boyfriend. But I kept quiet, secretly hoping Tyler would propose and take her off my hands financially. That lasted exactly 4 months. In July, Jessica bounced into the house waving a massive engagement ring. At least 2 carats, probably worth more than I make in 4 months. "We're engaged," she screamed. My parents went insane. Mom cried happy tears. Dad jumped up to hug her, acting like she'd won the Nobel Prize. I thought, great, maybe now she'll move out and become Tyler's problem. Jessica glowed, showing off the ring, describing Tyler's fancy restaurant proposal with a violinist. She immediately started taking selfies, posting captions like, "He said yes, planning the wedding of my dreams. So when's the big day?" Mom asked. "Next spring, cherry blossoms, everything perfect." But then Jessica's expression turned calculating, and I felt that familiar stomach knot. "We need to talk about the wedding budget," she said, glancing at me. "Tyler's being generous. He's handling the honeymoon deposits. We're going to Bali for 2 weeks at $800 a night." The room went quiet. We found the perfect venue. Riverside Country Club. Gorgeous ballroom, fits 200 people with catering, live band, open bar, photographer, videographer, flowers, my dress. She was talking faster, clearly rehearsed. Tyler's family is handling the rehearsal dinner, but traditionally, the bride's family covers the wedding. We've calculated everything. We need $45,000. Dead silence. Then 3 pairs of eyes slowly turned toward me like I was a walking ATM. $45,000, I repeated. "I know it sounds like a lot, but this is once in a lifetime, Alex. Tyler's family has money. They'll think we're trashy if we can't afford a proper wedding. Plus, you make good money and you've been living here rent-free." Rent-free? I couldn't believe it. "Jessica, I pay the mortgage. I pay for literally everything." That's when Jessica showed her true colors. Jessica's expression shifted from disappointed to something ugly, entitled, and demanding in a way I'd never seen before. "I can't believe you're being so selfish," she whined. "This is the most important day of my life, Alex. Tyler's family has serious money. They'll judge our entire family if we can't afford a proper wedding." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before saying yes to a wedding that costs more than most people's cars," I shot back. "Don't you dare!" Mom jumped in, voice shrill. "Your sister deserves happiness. If you cared about family, you'd help make her dreams come true." Help make her dreams come true. I stood up. 9 years of resentment boiling over. I've been making everyone's dreams come true for nearly a decade. I pay for this house, the food you eat, the electricity you're using right now. When's the last time any of you thanked me? When's the last time Jessica contributed a single dollar? Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. "Here we go with the martyr complex. Nobody forced you to pay for everything, Alex. You chose that." That comment hit like a slap. I chose to. What was the alternative? Let us become homeless. When Dad decided he was too good to work. "Watch your mouth," Dad growled, standing. "I worked 30 years before that plant closed. I deserve to retire at 60. While your son works himself to death supporting your retirement, I was seeing red. And what's Jessica's excuse? She's 27 and has never held a real job. I don't need to work," Jessica snapped. "Tyler takes care of me now. Unlike some people, I was smart enough to find a man who can provide." The smugness in her voice, looking at me like I was some failure for actually working. That's when I realized my sister wasn't just spoiled. She was genuinely terrible. "You're right, Jessica. Tyler can provide. So ask your rich fiancé to pay for the wedding." She laughed. "Tyler's already paying for the honeymoon. The bride's family pays for the wedding. That's tradition. Then scale it down to something we can afford." "Absolutely not." Her voice went ice cold. "I'm not having some cheap, embarrassing wedding because my brother is too selfish. What would Tyler's parents think? They'd think you lived within your means like a responsible adult. You don't understand. This isn't just about me. It's about our family's reputation. If we can't afford a decent wedding, they'll think we're trashy. Maybe they should wonder what kind of family they're marrying into, I said quietly. One where a 27-year-old has never worked and expects her brother to fund her fantasy wedding. How dare you, Mom gasped. Jessica is sweet and loving. Sweet and loving. When's the last time she said thank you? When's the last time she showed any appreciation for my 60-hour week so she can sleep until noon? Jessica stood up, hands on hips. We gave you a place to live. We let you stay here. You let me stay here in the house I pay for. I could afford my own place if I wasn't supporting 3 adults. Well, maybe you should move out. Then she shouted, "Stop trying to control everyone with your money." The shouting match lasted 2 hours. Jessica cried about me ruining her life. My parents called me selfish and ungrateful, conveniently forgetting I'd supported them for nearly a decade. I finally went to my room, listening through the walls to their angry whispers. So disappointed. Thought we raised him better. Jessica deserves better. I lay there wondering how I'd become the villain for refusing crushing debt for a wedding costing more than most people's annual salary. What I didn't know was they weren't done fighting. They were just getting started and willing to go much further than I ever imagined. The next few weeks were absolute torture. Jessica went into full manipulation mode, crying guilt trips, recruiting relatives to pressure me. Aunt Carol called 3 times asking why I was being so mean to Jessica. Cousin Mike texted that me refusing to help with the wedding was really messed up. Uncle Robert even stopped by my work site asking if I had money problems and needed help figuring out how to support my sister. Jessica had spun the story to make herself the victim and me the heartless monster, conveniently leaving out the $45,000 price tag and the fact that I supported the entire household. According to her version, I was just selfish and jealous of her happiness. But the worst part was my parents. They went from disappointed to actively hostile. Dad made snide comments like, "Must be nice to only care about yourself." Mom started forgetting to make dinner, so I'd come home exhausted to find everyone had eaten and nothing was left. She claimed she didn't know when I'd be home despite my identical schedule for years. They treated me like a stranger in the house I was paying for. When I'd watch TV, they'd change channels without asking or talk loudly about wedding plans, making it clear I wasn't welcome. They'd have important family discussions and pointedly exclude me. Jessica ramped up her social media game, posting constantly about wedding planning with her hashtag Jessica's Dream Wedding. She'd share expensive decorations, designer dresses, making videos about being blessed to marry Tyler, never once mentioning she expected someone else to pay for it all. She started treating me like a servant, leaving messes, using all the hot water before my work showers, blasting music when I needed sleep. When I complained, she'd say, "Maybe if you were more supportive of my wedding, I'd be more considerate." She brought Tyler around more, making comments about how some people weren't being supportive. How disappointing it was when family prioritized money over love. Tyler seemed uncomfortable, but Jessica just smiled sweetly. 3 weeks after our fight, Dad came home with news that made my blood run cold. Good news. I talked to my buddy Jim and he's willing to loan us $25,000 for Jessica's wedding. Jessica squealed and hugged Dad. I felt punched in the gut. "Dad, how exactly are you planning to pay back $25,000? He waved dismissively. "We'll figure it out. Family comes first. We'll figure it out. You don't have income. Mom makes $300 a week. How are we paying back $25,000? His look said everything. "Well, Alex, you're the one with the steady job. Number absolutely not. I'm not taking on debt for Jessica's wedding." "You don't have to take on the debt," Jessica said, sweetly examining her nails. "Dad already did. You just have to help pay it back." As a family, I stared in disbelief. "You manipulated Dad into borrowing money. I'll have to pay back. Nobody's forcing you." She shrugged. "But if you don't help, everyone will know what kind of brother you really are." The threat was clear. Either pay for her wedding or be branded a terrible person for abandoning family. That night, I realized my family had declared war. They'd taken on debt in my name without consent, turned relatives against me, and were emotionally blackmailing me into compliance. But I had no idea how low they'd go until Jessica's engagement party 2 weeks later, when my grandfather made a request that would change everything forever. Jessica's engagement party was held at Tyler's family's house. And let me tell you, it was something else. This place was like something out of a magazine. Massive colonial-style mansion with a circular driveway, white columns, perfectly manicured grounds, and a 3-car garage that probably cost more than most people's houses. Tyler's parents, Richard and Patricia, were old money types who clearly had serious wealth. The whole event probably cost more than I make in 3 months. I almost didn't go, but my grandfather specifically asked me to be there. Grandpa Eddie, my mom's dad, had driven up from Florida, where he'd been living since Grandma passed 2 years ago. He was 78, sharp as a tack, and had always been my favorite family member. Unlike everyone else, he'd worked his whole life, built his own successful plumbing business from nothing, and never asked anyone for handouts. The party was awkward as heck. Jessica was in full princess mode, floating around in this expensive dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, showing off to Tyler's family and friends about how perfect everything was going to be. She kept talking about the wedding plans in this breathless, excited way, dropping hints about how elaborate everything would be. Tyler's parents were polite, but I could tell they were already wondering what kind of family their son was marrying into, especially when Dad started telling loud stories about his steel mill days and complaining about how the plant closure had ruined everything for working people. Mom was trying too hard to impress everyone, complimenting every single thing about their house and asking lots of personal questions about their background. What made it worse was watching Jessica work the room. She was completely different around Tyler's family, playing up this sweet, innocent act while dropping subtle hints about how challenging it was planning such an elaborate wedding. I heard her tell Tyler's mom that some family members weren't being as supportive as she'd hoped, shooting me a pointed look across the room. She'd perfected this victim routine where she'd sigh dramatically and say things like, "I just hope everything works out," or "It's so important to have family support during times like this." Tyler's family seemed confused by these comments, but Jessica would just smile sweetly and change the subject, leaving them with the impression that there was some kind of family drama they didn't understand. Late in the evening, Grandpa Eddie pulled me aside to the back patio where it was quiet. The house had this amazing outdoor space with professional landscaping and a view of the lake, but Grandpa seemed more interested in having a private conversation. "Alex, you look stressed, son. Everything all right?" I gave him the whole story. The wedding demands the loan. Dad had taken the family pressure the way they were treating me. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, and asking clarifying questions. "Sounds like they're putting you in an impossible situation," he said when I finished. "Your sister's always been spoiled, but this is something else entirely. I just don't know what to do, Grandpa. If I don't help pay for this wedding, I'm the bad guy who ruined Jessica's dreams. But if I do, I'll be broke for years paying off their debt." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the lake, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Alex, I need to ask you a favor. I just sold my condo in Florida. Got a good price, $180,000 cash. I'm moving into a retirement community next month, but the paperwork won't be done for another 2 weeks." He handed me the envelope and I could feel how thick it was. "This is $25,000 in cash, part of the sale money. I don't trust keeping this much money in my checking account with all the fraud these days, and I can't risk carrying it back to Florida on the plane. Could you keep it safe for me until I'm ready to move? Just put it somewhere secure in your room." I didn't hesitate for even a second. This was my grandfather, the one person in my family who'd always treated me with respect and never asked me for anything unreasonable. He'd helped me get my electrical license, given me advice about starting my business, and was the only family member who seemed to understand how hard I worked. "Of course, Grandpa, I'll keep it safe. I knew I could count on you," he said, patting my shoulder with his weathered hand. "You're the only one in this family with a good head on your shoulders. Don't let them break you down, son. You're worth more than they appreciate." That night, I took the envelope home and hid it in my bedroom closet inside an old toolbox behind some winter clothes where nobody would think to look. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not my parents, not Jessica, nobody. Grandpa had asked for discretion, and I wasn't going to let him down. I went to sleep that night feeling good about finally being able to help someone in my family without it costing me anything. Grandpa needed a favor, and I was happy to do it. He'd always been there for me, and now I could be there for him. If I had known what my father was planning, I would have slept with that money under my pillow. Over the next few days, I noticed Dad acting strange. He was more agitated than usual, making hushed phone calls, and I caught him going through papers in his room late at night. When I asked what was wrong, he brushed me off with just wedding stuff or trying to figure out the finances. I should have known something was up. I should have seen the signs, but I was so focused on work and trying to avoid the wedding drama that I didn't put it together until it was way too late. 3 days after the engagement party, my whole world came crashing down. I woke up Saturday morning to the sound of Jessica's voice downstairs, high-pitched and excited. She was talking to someone on the phone about finalizing the catering and making the last payment to the venue. I checked my phone. 10:30 a.m. I'd slept in for once since I didn't have any electrical jobs scheduled for the weekend. Something about her tone bothered me. She sounded way too happy, like someone who just solved a major problem. I had a terrible feeling in my gut that I couldn't shake. I went to my closet to grab some clothes and decided to check on Grandpa's money while I was there. Better safe than sorry. Right, I moved aside the winter coats, opened the toolbox, and reached inside. Empty. My heart stopped. I dumped everything out of the toolbox, checked every corner of the closet, looked under my bed, in my dresser drawers, even in places I knew I hadn't put it. Nothing. The envelope with $25,000 was gone. I ran downstairs, still in my pajamas, probably looking like a maniac. Jessica was still on the phone in the kitchen, but when she saw my face, she quickly said, "I'll call you back," and hung up. "Where's my money?" I demanded, my voice shaking. She gave me this innocent look that made me want to scream. "What money?" "The money from my closet. $25,000. Where is it?" Dad walked in from the living room, and I could tell immediately from his expression that he knew exactly what I was talking about. There was something guilty and defiant in his eyes. "Oh, that money," he said casually, like we were discussing the weather. "I took it last night." "You what, Alex? Calm down. I know you've been hiding money from the family, and frankly, I'm disappointed. Your sister needed help with her wedding, and you refused. So I took matters into my own hands." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The room felt like it was spinning. "Dad, that money wasn't mine. It belongs to Grandpa Eddie." He laughed. Actually laughed like I told a joke. "Come on, Alex, stop making up stories. Your grandfather doesn't have that kind of cash lying around. I know you've been saving up, probably planning to move out and abandon your family. I'm not lying. He sold his condo and asked me to keep the money safe until he moves to the retirement home." Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. "Alex, just admit you had savings and didn't want to help with the wedding. It's not that big a deal. The money's already spent anyway." "Spent? What do you mean spent?" Dad pulled out his phone and showed me his banking app with way too much satisfaction. "I deposited it this morning, paid off the loan, and gave Jessica the rest for final wedding expenses. Everything's taken care of." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. "Dad, that money has to be paid back in 2 weeks when Grandpa comes to get it." "Then you better start saving," Jessica said, with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Or maybe you can finally take out that loan you should have gotten in the first place." I stared at her, really looked at her, and saw something that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't just entitled or spoiled, she was genuinely cruel. She knew that money didn't belong to me, and she didn't care. She was perfectly happy to let me take the blame and figure out how to replace it. "You're both insane," I said, my voice barely controlled. "That money belongs to Grandpa Eddie. When he finds out what you did, what I did." Dad's voice got hard and defensive. "I didn't do anything wrong. You had money. Your sister needed help and I helped her. That's what families do." Before I could respond, I heard the front door open. It was Grandpa Eddie arriving earlier than expected with a cheerful, "Hello, everyone." The color drained from Dad's face. Jessica looked like she'd seen a ghost. Grandpa walked into the kitchen with a smile that faded when he saw our expressions. He was wearing his usual weekend outfit, clean khakis and a polo shirt, and carrying a small overnight bag. "Is everything all right, Alex? You look upset." I felt like I was about to throw up. "Grandpa, the money. What about the money, son?" I couldn't find the words. "How do you tell your 78-year-old grandfather that your father stole his life savings to pay for your sister's wedding?" Dad stepped forward, trying to look confident but failing miserably. "Dad, there's been a misunderstanding." "Where's my money?" "Alex." Grandpa's voice got serious the way it used to when I was a kid, and he meant business. "Dad took it," I said quietly, feeling like a traitor, but knowing I couldn't lie. "He thought it was mine. He spent it on Jessica's wedding." The silence that followed was deafening. Grandpa Eddie looked at Dad with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure disappointment mixed with growing rage. "Frank," he said slowly, his voice deadly calm. "Please tell me I didn't hear what I think I heard." "Dad, I can explain." My father started, but Grandpa held up his hand. $25,000, Frank. That was everything I had left after the condo sale. I need that money for the retirement home deposit on Monday, or I lose my spot and end up on a waiting list for 2 years. Jessica, showing exactly what kind of person she really was, chose that moment to speak up. "Well, maybe you shouldn't have been keeping so much cash lying around. That's kind of irresponsible for someone your age." The look Grandpa gave her could have melted steel. Then he turned back to Dad, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Complete and total disappointment in his own son. "You have 48 hours to return every penny, Frank," he said, his voice trembling with controlled fury. "If you don't, I'm pressing charges for theft and suing you for everything you're worth." He looked at me with sad eyes. "I'm sorry, Alex. I know this isn't your fault." Then he walked out, leaving us in stunned silence. Dad collapsed into a chair, finally realizing the magnitude of what he'd done. But instead of taking responsibility for his mistake, he looked at me with pure hatred. "This is your fault," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "If you had just helped your sister like a normal brother, none of this would have happened." That was the moment I realized my family was beyond saving. And that was when I decided they were going to pay for what they'd done. I moved out that same day, took only what I could fit in my truck, and found a cheap studio apartment across town. I didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just disappeared while they were out dealing with the situation. For 2 weeks, I went completely no contact, changed my phone number, blocked them on social media, ignored the relatives who kept calling to ask what was happening. I wanted to see how they'd handle their first taste of real consequences without me there to fix everything. The wedding was supposed to happen that Saturday. On Friday night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Tyler. "Alex, this is Tyler Blackwood, Jessica's fiancé. We need to talk about what about the fact that your family has been lying to me for months. The wedding's off, man. I found out about the money situation, and honestly, what kind of people are they?" It turns out Grandpa Eddie had done exactly what he promised. When Dad couldn't come up with the money, Grandpa filed theft charges and a civil lawsuit. But more importantly, he told Tyler's family exactly what had happened. How Dad had stolen money from an elderly man to pay for the wedding. And how Jessica had not only encouraged it, but mocked Grandpa afterward. "My parents were horrified," Tyler continued. "They said anyone who would steal from their own elderly father isn't the kind of family they want to be associated with. And Jessica, man, when I confronted her about it, she didn't even seem sorry. She just kept saying it wasn't her fault and that you should have paid for the wedding in the first place. So what happens now? I'm done with her completely. I already got the ring back and canceled everything I could cancel. She's not who I thought she was, Alex. She's actually kind of a terrible person." That conversation felt like the first good news I'd had in months. Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as my family's world fell apart. Dad got arrested and charged with elder abuse and theft. The story made it into the local newspaper because of the dollar amount involved. Local man steals from elderly father to fund daughter's wedding. Mom had to take on extra shifts at the grocery store, but still couldn't cover the mortgage payments without my income. Jessica's social media went from wedding planning posts to radio silence overnight. Word got around about what happened. Small town, you know how it is. Her reputation was completely destroyed. She couldn't show her face anywhere without people talking about how she'd encouraged her father to steal from her own grandfather. The wedding venue caterer and band all demanded payment for services that had been canceled last minute. Jessica had racked up thousands in additional debt that nobody could pay. Her credit was ruined, and Tyler's family made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why the wedding had been called off. But the real karma came 2 months later, when I got another unexpected phone call. This time, it was Mom, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "Alex, please, Alex, we need to talk. Can you come over just once? I don't think that's a good idea. Please, son, we're in real trouble. I mean, real trouble." Against my better judgment, I drove over to the house one evening. What I found was devastating and exactly what they deserved. The house was a mess. Dirty dishes piled up everywhere, trash bags by the door, utilities obviously behind on payments. The lawn was overgrown, paint was peeling, and one of the gutters was hanging loose. Mom looked like she'd aged 10 years with dark circles under her eyes and gray roots showing in her hair. Jessica was sitting on the couch in sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, no makeup, looking like a completely different person from the princess who demanded a $45,000 wedding. "Alex," Mom started crying the second she saw me. "Thank God you're here. We don't know what to do anymore." "Where's Dad?" "Jail," Jessica said bitterly, not even looking up from her phone. 6-month sentence, plus he has to pay Grandpa back every penny with interest. We had to get a public defender because we can't afford a real lawyer. I looked around the house I'd been paying for since I was 22. "What do you want from me?" "We're going to lose the house." Mom sobbed. "I can't make the mortgage payments on my salary. We're 3 months behind already. And the bank sent a foreclosure notice. We need your help, Alex. Please." Jessica finally looked up at me, and for the first time in her life, I saw genuine desperation in her eyes. "Alex, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I didn't think about what would happen to everyone else." "You didn't think. Period," I said coldly. "What happened to Tyler taking care of you?" What happened to never having to worry about money again? Her face crumpled. He left me, called off the wedding, took back the ring. Everything. And now nobody will date me because everyone knows what happened. I can't even get a job because everywhere I apply, someone recognizes my name from the newspaper article. That's unfortunate. Please. Mom begged, getting down on her knees. We'll do anything. Jessica will get a job. I'll work more hours. We'll pay you back every penny. Just help us save the house. I looked at these two women who had made my life miserable for years, who had called me selfish and ungrateful, who had stolen from my grandfather and expected me to fix their problems. I thought about all the years I'd sacrificed my own dreams to keep them comfortable. All the times they'd taken my help for granted and demanded more. No, I said simply. What? Jessica's voice cracked. I said no. Figure it out yourselves. Get jobs, downsize, move in with relatives, do what normal people do when they can't afford their lifestyle. But we're family, Mom cried. Family, I almost laughed. You mean like how Dad treated his family when he stole from Grandpa? Like how Jessica treated her family when she mocked an old man for losing his life savings? I headed toward the door, then turned back one last time. You know what's funny? If you had just asked me for help with a reasonable wedding, maybe $5,000 or $10,000, I probably would have said yes eventually. But you got greedy. You wanted everything handed to you without any sacrifice on your part. And when I said no, you decided to take it anyway. Jessica was crying now, her makeup running down her face. Alex, please, I'll do anything. I'll get 3 jobs if I have to. Just please, don't let us lose everything. You already lost everything, I said quietly. The day you decided I was an ATM instead of a brother, I walked out and never looked back. Walked out and never looked back. Walked out and never looked back. Walked out and never looked back.